The chamber of the Galactic Council stretched wide enough to hold 1,000 beings from across known space. And today it held exactly that number as Ambassador Daniel Parker walked through the massive doors. His footsteps echoed against polished floors that had witnessed 300 years of alien politics, trade agreements, and the occasional declaration of war. Daniel kept his face calm, even though his heart hammered against his ribs. He had received the urgent summons only 6 hours ago, barely enough time to prepare for whatever the Council deemed important enough to demand immediate attendance from all member species. Around him sat representatives from 12 different alien races. The tall crystalline Vorath, who sparkled under the chamber lights. The stocky furred Grellians who preferred the shadows. The aquatic Nereids in their water-filled observation spheres. And 9 other species that humanity had come to know over the past 20 years since First Contact. High Counselor Zartek rose from his seat at the central podium. His 6 arms spread wide in what passed for a welcoming gesture among his people. Though Daniel had learned to read the tension in those movements after 2 years as Bionas, Earth's representative, esteemed members of the Galactic Council, Zartek's voice boomed through translation devices that converted his clicks and whistles into comprehensible speech for each species present. We gather today to address a matter of utmost importance to our continued prosperity and security. Daniel settled into Earth's designated seat, a simple chair that looked almost primitive compared to the elaborate thrones and platforms other species preferred, and waited for 3 centuries. This council has maintained peace across 200 star systems, Zartek continued, his primary eyes scanning the assembled delegates while his secondary eyes watched for reactions. Our combined fleets have protected trade routes, defended against pirates and raiders, and ensured that smaller species could grow without fear of conquest. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Daniel recognized the setup for what it was. Politicians across the galaxy apparently shared the same tendency to butter up their audience before delivering bad news. However, maintaining such protection requires substantial resources. Zartek's voice took on a harder edge. The Council has determined that all member species must contribute their fair share to the defense budget that keeps them safe. Daniel's fingers tightened slightly on the armrest of his chair. Effective immediately, all Council member worlds will remit 30% of their gross planetary product as a protection tax, Zartek announced, and the chamber erupted into startled exclamations in a dozen different languages. 30%. Daniel's mind raced through the calculations. That would cripple Earth's economy, drain resources from education, healthcare, infrastructure, everything humanity had worked to build in the 2 decades since joining galactic society. The Grellian delegate rose to object, his fur bristling with agitation, but Zartek cut him off with a sharp gesture. This is not open for debate, the High Counselor stated flatly. The protection tax has been levied on Council worlds since the founding of this body. Newer members have simply enjoyed a grace period to establish themselves. But that period has now ended for all species who joined in the last 50 standard years. Daniel watched as the Grellian slowly sat back down, shoulders slumped in defeat. Around the chamber, other newer species showed similar resignation. Apparently, this was a fight that had been lost before it began. Collection will begin in 30 planetary rotations, Zartek continued, pulling up holographic displays showing payment schedules and enforcement protocols. Failure to comply will result in immediate trade sanctions, revocation of Council protection, and possible military intervention to secure owed funds. The casual mention of military force sent a chill through the assembled delegates. Daniel knew from his briefings that the Council fleet numbered over 10,000 warships. Earth had maybe 200 vessels that could even be called military grade. Does any representative require clarification on the payment procedures? Zartek asked, his tone making it clear He expected none. Daniel stood up. The movement drew every eye in the chamber as he rose to his full height, straightened his jacket, and looked directly at the High Counselor. Zartek's eyes narrowed slightly. Does the human delegate have questions about the tax implementation? Daniel said nothing. He simply held the alien's gaze for a long moment, then turned and walked toward the exit. Ambassador Parker. Zartek's voice carried a warning edge. You have not been dismissed. Daniel kept walking, his footsteps once again echoing in the suddenly silent chamber. He could feel hundreds of alien eyes watching him, could sense the confusion and shock at his unprecedented breach of protocol. Ambassador. Zartek's shout followed him, but Daniel didn't pause, didn't look back, didn't acknowledge the High Counselor's authority over him in any way. He passed through the massive doors and heard them seal behind him with a heavy thud that sounded almost final in the corridor outside. Daniel activated his comm device. Get me Admiral Chun. Priority channel. The response came within seconds. Admiral Lisa Chun's face appearing on the small screen. I'm here. How bad is it? 30% gross planetary product, Daniel said quietly, still walking toward the docking bay where his shuttle waited. They're calling it a protection tax. Lisa's expression hardened. Are we paying? What do you think? Daniel asked. I think Earth doesn't pay tribute to anyone, Lisa replied. And Daniel could hear the steel in her voice that had made her the youngest admiral in Earth Defense Force history. What's our play? Silence, Daniel said as he reached his shuttle and climbed aboard. We give them nothing, no acknowledgement, no negotiation, no response at all. They'll see that as defiance. They'll see it correctly then. Daniel strapped himself into the pilot's seat and began the launch sequence. Start fortifying our positions, quietly upgrade the defense grid, redirect civilian traffic away from Council patrol routes. You realize they might actually attack us over this? Lisa's concern showed despite her military composure. They might. Daniel agreed as his shuttle lifted off from the docking platform and turned toward the jump gate that would take him back to Earth. But I'd rather face them as free people defending our home than as slaves who paid for the chains ourselves. Understood. Lisa nodded. I'll start preparations. How long do we have? They want payment in 30 days. Daniel watched the council station shrink in his rear viewfinder. Use every second. The comm clicked off, and Daniel sat alone with his thoughts as the shuttle accelerated toward the jump gate. Back in that chamber, the council was probably still arguing about his walkout. Trying to understand what humanity's silence meant, they would learn soon enough when Earth's next scheduled communication never came. When human delegates stopped attending council sessions, when every inquiry and demand met with the same absolute quiet silence could be the most powerful weapon of all, when wielded with purpose. And Daniel intended to show the Galactic Council that humanity would rather face extinction than surrender. Their freedom for the illusion of protection. The stars streaked past his view screen as the shuttle jumped to faster-than-light travel, carrying him home to a world that would soon have to decide if his gamble was brilliance or suicide. 3 months had passed since Daniel Parker walked out of the council chamber, and in that time Earth had not sent a single official communication to the Galactic Council. Not one message, not one explanation, not even a formal refusal of the protection tax demand. Admiral Lisa Chun stood on the command deck of the EDS Vigilant, humanity's newest battlecruiser, and watched the sensor display with practiced calm. Her crew worked quietly at their stations, checking and rechecking the defense grid that now surrounded Earth's system like an invisible shield. Admiral, we've got multiple contacts dropping out of jump space at the system's edge. Lieutenant Commander Andrew Sullivan reported from the tactical station, his voice steady despite the tension that immediately filled the command deck. How many? Lisa asked, though she already suspected the answer. Scanning now. Andrew's fingers flew over his console. Count is at 57 ships. Configuration matches Council Enforcement Fleet. Wait. Make that 64 vessels and still climbing. Lisa felt her jaw tighten. The Council wasn't sending a diplomatic mission or a small show of force. This was an invasion fleet. Final count is 82 warships. Andrew looked up from his display. Flagship identifies as the Croton Dreadnought Unrelenting. That's Commander Vexther's ship. Every officer on the bridge knew that name. Vexther had crushed 17 rebellions across Council space over the past decade, and his reputation for brutal efficiency preceded him like a storm cloud. Sound general alert, but do not power weapons. Lisa ordered. Bring all defense stations to ready status, but keep them in passive mode. Ma'am. They're moving into attack formation, Andrew protested. We should at least charge the main batteries. We are not firing first, Lisa said firmly. Activate the defense grid and position our ships in protective formation around the orbital platforms. But weapons stay cold unless they shoot at us. The crew moved to obey. And within minutes, Earth's defense force had arranged themselves in a careful pattern. Not aggressive. Not retreating. Simply waiting on the main view screen. The Council fleet continued its approach, and Lisa could see the massive Croton Dreadnought at its center. The ship bristled with weapons that could level a continent, and it was flanked by dozens of smaller but equally deadly warships. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Unrelenting, the communications officer reported on screen. Lisa commanded. Commander Vexther's face appeared. His reptilian features twisted in what might have been contempt or curiosity. With Crotons, it was hard to tell the difference. His scales were dark, green shot through with blue patterns that indicated high rank among his people. Human forces. I am Commander Vexther of the Galactic Council Enforcement Division. His voice came through the translators with a harsh metallic edge. You will stand down your defenses and prepare to receive boarding parties who will assess and collect the taxes owed to the Council. Lisa stared at the screen but said nothing. She had her orders directly from Earth's civilian government. Maintain complete silence with Council forces. I am addressing the commander of these vessels. Vexther's eyes narrowed. Respond immediately or face consequences. Still, Lisa remained quiet, her expression calm and utterly unrevealing. Beside her, Andrew shifted nervously, but held his tongue. This is your final warning. Vexther leaned forward in his command chair. If you do not acknowledge this communication within 60 seconds, I will interpret your silence as hostile intent. The seconds ticked past on the chronometer. 10, 20, 30. Lisa counted them internally while keeping her gaze locked on the Croton commander's face. 40 seconds. 50, 60. The deadline passed and Lisa still said nothing. Did nothing except stand perfectly still on her bridge. Vexther's expression shifted to something that looked like genuine confusion. Clearly he had expected either submission or defiance. But this absolute silence seemed to unnerve him in a way that words never could. Very well, he finally said, his voice uncertain for the first time. Maintain position while I consult with Council Command. The transmission cut off abruptly, and Lisa allowed herself a small exhale. The first test had passed. The Council fleet was here, but not yet shooting. Ma'am, what happens when they get tired of waiting? Andrew asked quietly. Then we find out if they're willing to start a war over taxes. Lisa replied, still watching the enemy fleet on her screen's. Hours passed in tense silence. The Council ships held their formation while Earth's forces maintained theirs. Neither side moving. Neither side communicating. Just two fleets staring at each other across the black void of space on Earth below. Governor Jacob Martinez coordinated the civilian response to the crisis. Factories that had been quietly retooled over the past 3 months now produce components for weapons and shields. Farms increased production to ensure Earth could survive if Council trade sanctions went into effect. and medical facilities prepared for the possibility of casualties in orbit above Mars. Engineer Patricia Moore oversaw the completion of 3 new defense satellites, each one equipped with sensors and weapons that could track and disable enemy ships without destroying them. Humanity's goal was not to kill their enemies, but to prove that conquering Earth would cost more than any tax could ever be worth. Back at the Council Station Zenith Prime, Junior Delegate Kevin Foster from the Narration species watched the standoff with growing fascination. His people had paid the protection tax for over a century, and the financial burden had kept their civilization in perpetual debt to the Council. Kevin accessed the public networks and began digging into Council financial records. If the humans were willing to risk everything to avoid this tax, perhaps there was something worth discovering in how those funds were actually used. What he found made his aquatic features pale with shock. Expense reports showed council members living in massive luxury while their own people struggled. Military budgets that went to building private yachts for admirals instead of defensive weapons, and accounting that mysteriously classified 80% of all tax revenue as administrative costs. Kevin copied everything he could find onto a secure data chip and sent an encrypted message to an Earth communication relay. He didn't know if the humans would receive it or respond, but someone needed to know the truth. Back in Earth orbit, Lisa watched as the Council fleet suddenly shifted formation. They were spreading out, clearly preparing to either attack or encircle the human defenses. All ships maintain position, she ordered across the fleet channel. Do not react to their movements. The Council vessels moved into an attack spread, weapons charging, fighters launching from carrier bays. Everything screamed imminent assault, and still Lisa said nothing, did nothing, just watched and waited. Her crews were terrified. She could see it in their faces, but they trusted her judgment on the unrelenting. Vexter stared at his tactical displays in complete bewilderment. Every species he had ever faced either surrendered immediately or fought back with desperate fury. This calm, silent resistance broke every rule of engagement he understood. Sir, the humans aren't reacting at all, his tactical officer reported. They're not charging weapons, not breaking formation, not even hailing us to threaten or negotiate. I can see that, Vexter growled. What I cannot see is why. What are they waiting for? Nobody on his bridge had an answer, and in that uncertainty, the Croton commander made his first mistake. He hesitated. That hesitation gave Kevin's data package time to reach Earth, gave Patricia's new satellites time to come online, and gave humanity one more day to prepare for whatever came next. The standoff continued, and with each passing hour of silence, the Council fleet grew more uncertain, while Earth's resolve only strengthened. The encrypted data package from Kevin Foster arrived at Earth's communication center during the 3rd week of the standoff, and within hours it had reached the desk of Gregory Walsh, humanity's chief financial analyst and the man responsible for understanding Galactic economics. Gregory sat in his small office reviewing the files with growing disbelief. His background in forensic accounting had served Earth well during trade negotiations with alien species, but nothing had prepared him for the scale of corruption documented in these council records. This can't be right, he muttered to himself, checking the figures for the 5th time, but the numbers remained stubbornly consistent. Year after year of the so-called protection tax being funneled into private accounts, luxury expenses, and ventures that had nothing to do with defense. He opened a secure line to Daniel Parker, who had remained on Earth coordinating the diplomatic response to the crisis. When Daniel's face appeared on the screen, Gregory didn't waste time with pleasantries. I need you to see this immediately, Gregory said, already transferring the files. We've got proof that the Council has been lying about the protection tax for decades. Daniel's eyes widened as he reviewed the documents, his diplomat's composure cracking for just a moment before reasserting itself. How solid is this evidence? Ironclad, Gregory replied. Expense receipts, transfer records, internal communications. Whoever sent us this data had access to the Council's actual financial systems. Not just the public reports they show member species. Can we verify the source? Daniel asked. The encryption signature matches Narration government protocols. Gregory pulled up another screen. My guess is someone on the inside got curious about where all that tax money actually goes. Daniel leaned back in his chair, his mind already working through the implications. Humanity's silent resistance had been based on principle, the refusal to pay tribute to anyone. But this evidence transformed their stand from defiance into justified rebellion. How quickly can you compile this into a format that every council species can understand? Daniel asked. Give me 6 hours, and I'll have a presentation ready, Gregory promised. Charts, graphs, side-by-side comparisons of what the council claimed versus what they actually spent. Make it 8 hours, Daniel said. I want this bulletproof. We're going to break our silence. But when we do, it needs to hit like a hammer. While Gregory worked, events in Earth orbit continued to deteriorate. Commander Vexter had spent 2 weeks watching human ships maintain their silent vigil. And his patience had finally run out. Prepare boarding shuttles, he ordered his crew. If they will not respond to words, we will take their compliance by force. Sir, Earth Defense Forces outnumber our boarding capacity, his tactical officer warned. We would need to disable their ships first, then disable them, Vexter snapped. Target their engines and weapons, render them helpless, but avoid casualties if possible. The Council wants taxes, not martyrs. The Council fleet opened fire with precision weapons designed to cripple rather than destroy. And space lit up with energy beams lancing toward human vessels on the Vigilant. Alarms shrieked as the first shots struck their shields. Return fire, Lisa commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. Disable their weapons, but do not destroy their ships. I want them operational, but toothless. Earth's defense grid came alive with coordinated precision. Months of upgrades and Patricia Moore's new satellite network provided targeting data that let human forces shoot with surgical accuracy. Council ships found their weapon batteries exploding from pinpoint strikes, their shield generators overloading from electromagnetic pulses, their engine systems shut down by computer viruses that human hackers had developed specifically for this moment. Within 20 minutes, 17 Council vessels were dead in space, and not a single human ship had been destroyed. Vexter stared at his tactical display in shock as his mighty enforcement fleet floundered against defenses that should not have existed. How are they doing this? He demanded. Our intelligence said Earth had minimal military capability. Sir, their technology has improved dramatically, his science officer reported, her voice shaking. These weapons and defense systems are more advanced than anything in our databases. What Vexter didn't know was that humanity had spent their 3 months of silence very productively. Every engineer, every scientist, every manufacturer had been working around the clock to turn Earth from an easy target into a fortress that could defend itself. Captain Nicole Brooks commanded the human merchant fleet, and she had spent those same 3 months implementing a plan that would make the Council regret ever threatening Earth's trade. When Vexter's ships tried to intercept human cargo vessels traveling between Earth and independent colonies, they found nothing but empty hulks on autopilot. Actual cargo ships had rerouted weeks ago to paths that avoided Council territory entirely, and human goods now flowed freely to markets that were hungry for alternatives to Council-approved suppliers. They've been playing us, Vexter realized with growing horror. This whole time, they were preparing, back on Earth. Gregory finished his presentation and sent it to Daniel with a simple message. Ready to deploy. Daniel reviewed the compiled evidence one final time, then opened a communication channel that would broadcast to every member species of the Galactic Council simultaneously. It was time to break the silence. His face appeared on screens across 200 star systems, and his first words in 3 months carried the weight of humanity's judgment. People of the Council worlds. My name is Daniel Parker, and I represent Earth, he began, his voice calm but filled with quiet fury. For 3 months we have remained silent in response to the Council's demand for taxes. Today, I will tell you why. Images began displaying alongside his transmission. Gregory's charts showing the flow of tax money. The comparison between claimed defense spending and actual luxury purchases. The evidence of corruption that went back generations. Your leaders told you this money was for protection. Daniel continued. They told you it kept your family safe, your trade routes secure, your worlds defended, and you believed them because why would they lie? More images appeared, showing council members' private estates, their expensive collections, their personal fleets of ships that serve no military purpose. Earth refused to pay because we will not be slaves. Daniel's voice hardened. But you should refuse to pay because you are being robbed. Every credit you send to the Council goes not to protect you, but to enrich those who claim to lead you. Across Council space, billions of beings watched in stunned silence as the evidence mounted. The Grellians saw how much of their tax money had been spent on artwork for Council chambers. The Narians learned that their financial struggles were funding private vacation planets for Council elite. And every species discovered that they had been deceived. The Council threatened Earth with invasion if we did not comply. Daniel gestured to another screen showing footage of the battle in Earth orbit. They sent 82 warships to force our submission, and we stopped them without destroying a single vessel because we do not wish to kill, only to defend our freedom. He paused, letting the images of disabled Council ships drift helplessly in space speak for themselves. We invite you to join us in demanding accountability. Daniel concluded. Not through violence, not through war, but through the simple act of asking your leaders where your money actually goes. Ask them why they need 30% of everything you produce when 80% of it ends up in their personal accounts. The transmission ended, and Daniel sat back in his chair, knowing he had just started a revolution. Within hours, protests erupted on Grellian worlds. Narian delegates demanded emergency sessions of their government, and 3 minor species formally announced they would no longer pay the protection tax until a full audit was completed. Councilor Zartek watched his carefully constructed system of control begin to crumble, and he knew that humanity's silence had been more dangerous than any words could have been. It had given them time to find the truth. The Council's response to Daniel's broadcast came swiftly and without mercy. High Councilor Zartek ordered Commander Vexter to crush Earth's resistance immediately. Consequences be damned. And the Croton commander found himself with orders that left no room for hesitation. All ships are to withdraw from Earth orbit. Vexter read the transmission from Council headquarters with growing unease. Proceed to Rally Point Epsilon and await reinforcement fleet. Combined forces will return and reduce human military capability to 0. His tactical officer looked up from her console with alarm clear on her scaled features. Sir, those orders would require us to bombard civilian infrastructure. That violates every engagement protocol we have. The Council has suspended standard protocols, Vexter said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of a soldier being asked to do something that violated his honor. They want Earth broken as an example to other species considering rebellion. Back on Earth, Admiral Lisa Chen received intelligence about the Council's reinforcement fleet and the new orders it carried. 200 additional warships were being assembled. Enough firepower to overwhelm even Earth's. Improved defenses through sheer numbers. She called an emergency meeting with Daniel Parker and Governor Jacob Martinez in the secure command center buried beneath Earth's capital city. We, At maybe 72 hours before the fall, Council fleet arrives. Lisa said without preamble, "Our defense grid can handle 80 ships. It cannot handle 280. Can we evacuate the orbital platforms?" Jacob asked, his civilian background making him think first of saving lives. "We can evacuate personnel, but the platforms themselves are too valuable to abandon." Lisa pulled up tactical displays showing Earth's defensive infrastructure. Without them, we lose our early warning systems and half our weapons range. Daniel studied the displays with the careful attention he brought to difficult negotiations. What if we don't let them leave? Both Lisa and Jacob turned to look at him with confusion. "Vexthor's fleet is damaged and demoralized," Daniel explained, his diplomat's mind seeing an angle that the military perspective had missed. "His ships are in no condition to fight their way out if we were to, say, politely insist they remain as our guests. You want to take Council warships hostage?" Lisa's eyes widened. "That's an act of war. We're already at war." "We're just pretending we're not," Daniel replied. "But what if we offered Vexthor and his crews a choice? Stay and help us negotiate a real peace. Or try to leave and we disable enough of their ships that the Council will court-martial them for losing a fleet." "That's a dangerous gamble," Jacob said slowly. "But if it works, we gain allies instead of enemies." Lisa considered the plan from a tactical standpoint. "I would need to position our forces carefully. Contain the Council fleet without making it look like an obvious trap. Can you do it?" Daniel asked. "Give me 12 hours. Lisa stood, already planning ship movements in her head. "But Daniel, if this goes wrong, we'll have fighting in orbit over a populated planet. If we do nothing, we'll have that anyway," Daniel pointed out. "At least this way, we might end the war before it really starts. In orbit." Lisa put her plan into motion with the precision of a chess master positioning pieces. Human ships quietly shifted their formations, moving into patterns that looked defensive, but actually created a cage around it. Council Fleet Commander Vexthor noticed the movements and called his officers to his bridge. "The humans are repositioning analysis?" "They're boxing us in, sir," his tactical officer reported. "If we try to leave the system now, we'll have to fight through 3 defensive lines. Why would they wait until now to trap us?" Vexthor wondered aloud. They've had weeks to make this move. The answer came in the form of a communication request from the human vessel Vigilant. Vexthor accepted it and found himself face to face with Admiral Lisa Chun. "Commander Vexthor, I'm contacting you directly because I believe we're both soldiers who would prefer not to kill each other if we can avoid it," Lisa said, her tone respectful but firm. "I am listening." Vexthor replied cautiously. "You have orders to withdraw and return with enough force to destroy Earth's orbital infrastructure," Lisa stated flatly. "We both know what that means. Thousands of civilian deaths. Probably millions when debris falls on populated areas." Vexthor's expression hardened, but he didn't deny it. "I'm offering you an alternative," Lisa continued. "Stay here. Help us negotiate with the Council. And maybe we can end this without more bloodshed. You're asking me to betray my superiors." Vexthor said, "I'm asking you to consider whether your superiors are worth your loyalty." Lisa brought up the evidence Gregory Walsh had compiled. "You saw the same broadcasts everyone else did. Do you really want to kill for people who've been stealing from your own species for decades?" Vexthor was silent for a long moment, his reptilian features impossible to read. Finally he spoke, his voice heavy with conflict. "What guarantee do I have that you won't simply destroy my fleet once I agree?" "You have my word as a fellow officer," Lisa said simply. "And more practically, you have the fact that destroying your ships helps neither of us. I need allies, not martyrs. If I refuse?" Vexthor asked, "Then we disable your fleet anyway, and you face court-martial for losing to a species." "The Council considered primitive," Lisa replied bluntly. "At least if you work with us, You can tell your government you were negotiating from a position of strength. It was a masterful piece of manipulation, giving Vexter a way to justify cooperation without admitting defeat, and the Croton commander recognized it for what it was. You, devious for a species so new to galactic politics, he said with what might have been grudging respect. We learn from the best. Lisa allowed herself a small smile. So what do you say? Commander, do we end this standoff or escalate it? Vexter looked around his bridge at the officers who served under him, saw the same conflict in their eyes that he felt in his hearts. They were soldiers, trained to follow orders. But they were also thinking beings who had seen the evidence of council corruption. I will need to consult with my senior staff. Vexter said finally. You have 2 hours, Lisa replied. After that, my ships will begin active containment procedures, and things will get much more complicated. The transmission ended, and Vexter sat in silence on his command bridge, weighing loyalty against honor, duty against truth. Meanwhile, on Earth, engineer Patricia Moore completed the final adjustments to a communication relay that would bypass all council networks. If Vexter agreed to help, humanity would need a way to speak directly to the populations of council worlds without their governments filtering the message. Kevin Foster, the young Narration delegate who had started this whole revelation by sharing the financial data, continued digging through council archives and found something even more damning: evidence that the council had manufactured threats to justify the protection tax, including hiring pirates to attack trade routes the council fleets would then heroically defend. He sent this new evidence to Earth with a simple note: use this wisely. The 2 hours passed slowly, and when Vexter's face appeared on Lisa's screen again, she knew the answer before he spoke. My fleet will remain in Earth orbit pending negotiations, Vexter said formally. But I want it understood that we are not surrendering. We are choosing to seek the truth about our own government's actions. Understood, Commander? Lisa nodded with genuine respect. Welcome to the rebellion. The collapse of the Galactic Council happened faster than anyone expected. Within 6 days of Vexter's decision to remain at Earth, 5 more species formally refused to pay the protection tax. And within 2 weeks, that number had grown to 9 of the 12 member species. High Councilor Zertek watched his authority crumble in real time as protests erupted across council space. On the Grelian homeworld, citizens blockaded government buildings demanding accountability. Narration financial experts published independent audits that confirmed everything Gregory Walsh had revealed. And even the usually compliant Vareth began asking uncomfortable questions about where their crystalline art treasures had gone. Reinforcement fleet that was supposed to crush Earth never launched. Too many crews refused to follow orders from leaders they no longer trusted. And several admirals quietly contacted Daniel Parker to ask what humanity proposed as an alternative to the Council's corrupt system. Daniel stood before a communication array that would broadcast his message to every corner of known space. And beside him stood Commander Vexter in a show of unity that spoke louder than any words could. The Croton officer had become an unexpected ally, his military reputation lending credibility to humanity's cause. People of the galaxy, Daniel began, his voice carrying across light years through Patricia Moore's bypass relay. The Galactic Council as you knew it has ended, not through violence, not through conquest, but through the simple act of demanding truth from those who claim to lead. Images appeared showing council members being escorted from their offices by their own security forces, not as prisoners, but as disgraced officials facing justice from their own people. Earth did not start this revolution because we wanted power, Daniel continued. We started it because we refused to be slaves. And in defending our freedom, we discovered that many of you were enslaved as well. Enslaved by debt, by lies, by a system that took your hard work and turned it into luxury for the few. beside him. Vexter stepped forward to speak, his voice rough but sincere. "I came to Earth as an enforcer, ready to punish defiance," he said. "But I found something I did not expect. People willing to fight for principles instead of profit. And in doing so, they showed me that my own leaders were not worthy of the loyalty I gave them." The broadcast shifted to show representatives from 7 different species standing together in what had once been the council chamber. They called themselves the Reform Coalition, and they had gathered to discuss what should replace the system that had just fallen. Senator Helen Wright represented Earth in these discussions, her background in constitutional law making her invaluable in drafting new governance structures. She worked alongside delegates who had once been enemies, finding common ground in their shared desire for fairness and transparency. "We propose a voluntary alliance," Helen explained during one session that was broadcast live to all member species. "Each world contributes what they choose to mutual defense, and all financial records are public and auditable by independent observers." The Grellian delegate, an elder named Corvin, who had spent his life under council taxation, raised a concern. "What prevents species from contributing nothing and benefiting from others' protection?" "Reputation and reciprocity," Helen replied. "Species who contribute fairly gain voting power in alliance decisions. Those who contribute nothing have no voice in how the alliance operates, which means they cannot benefit from trade agreements, technology sharing, or diplomatic support." It was a radical departure from the Council's forced compliance. But the logic was sound. Create incentives for cooperation without resorting to threats. Kevin Foster, who had gone from junior delegate to hero of the rebellion, worked with Gregory Walsh to establish new financial oversight systems. Their collaboration produced a banking structure that made it nearly impossible to hide corruption, with automatic alerts triggered whenever spending patterns look suspicious. "The key is transparency," Gregory explained to a gathering of financial ministers from 20 different species. "Every credit spent gets tracked, every expense gets justified, and any citizen can access the records at any time." Some officials protested that this level of openness would be inefficient, but Gregory countered with simple mathematics. The amount of money saved by eliminating corruption far exceeded any administrative costs of tracking it. Meanwhile, Admiral Lisa Chun found herself in the unexpected role of military advisor to species that had barely known what warfare looked like before the Council's enforcement fleet arrived. She taught defensive strategies, explaining how smaller forces could protect themselves through intelligence and preparation rather than overwhelming firepower. "You don't need the biggest fleet," she told a class of junior officers from 6 different species. "You need the smartest tactics and the will to defend what matters." Earth proved that against Vexter's forces. The Krogan commander, who attended these sessions as both student and occasional instructor, nodded in agreement. "I thought overwhelming force could solve any problem," he admitted. "But the humans taught me that determination and preparation defeat size every time." 3 months after the Council's fall, representatives from 23 species gathered for the formal signing of the Alliance Charter, a document that established voluntary cooperation as the basis for galactic governance. Daniel Parker stood with the other signatories, holding the stylus that would add Earth's agreement to the document. Around him were beings who months ago had been strangers or enemies, now united by shared principles. This charter recognizes that freedom is the foundation of prosperity. Daniel read from the preamble that Helen had drafted. "No species shall be compelled to serve. No world shall be taxed without representation. And no government shall operate in secrecy from those it claims to represent." He signed. And one by one, the other delegates added their marks: crystalline patterns from the Varth, aquatic symbols from the Narians, paw prints from the Grellians, and signatures from species humanity had barely begun to know. High Counselor Zartek was not present for the signing. He faced trial on his own world for corruption and abuse of power. But even in his absence, his influence shaped the proceedings by showing everyone what they did not want to become. When the ceremony concluded, Daniel found himself approached by Kevin Foster, the young Narration who had started everything by sharing those first damning financial records. Ambassador Parker, "I wanted to thank you," Kevin said, his aquatic features showing genuine emotion. "My people have been in debt for 3 generations because of the protection tax. Now my children will grow up free. You're the one who deserves thanks," Daniel replied sincerely. "Without your courage to share that data, we would still be fighting instead of building." Kevin shook his head. "I only shared information. You and your people showed us it was possible to stand up to power, and that made all the difference." Nearby, Commander Vexter spoke with Admiral Lisa Chun about establishing joint training exercises between Earth Defense Forces and the reformed Croton military. The 2 officers had developed mutual respect through their unlikely alliance. "Your tactics are sound," Vexter admitted, "but your weapons technology is still developing. Perhaps we could share designs in exchange for your strategic training." "That's the whole point of the alliance," Lisa smiled. "We share what we're good at, and everyone benefits." As the gathering dispersed and delegates prepared to return to their home worlds, Daniel stood alone for a moment, looking at the signed charter. Earth had joined Galactic Society only 20 years ago, young and uncertain. And now they had helped reshape that society into something better. The silence humanity had chosen as their first response to Council demands had proven more powerful than any speech. It gave them time to prepare, time to investigate, and time to show other species that resistance was possible. Governor Jacob Martinez appeared beside Daniel, having arrived for the ceremony representing Earth's civilian government. "Quite a journey from that day you walked out of the council chamber," he observed. "The hardest part was trusting that silence would be enough," Daniel admitted. "Every instinct screamed to argue, to explain, to defend our position, but silence gave them nothing to argue against," Jacob said thoughtfully. "They couldn't negotiate if you wouldn't talk, couldn't threaten if you wouldn't react. It drove them crazy. It gave us power," Daniel agreed. "And we used that power not to conquer, but to free. I think humanity can be proud of that." 1 year later, the Voluntary Alliance had grown to include 47 species, and Earth's population celebrated the anniversary of their silent revolution with quiet satisfaction. They had proven that a new species could change an ancient system, that principle could defeat power, and that sometimes the most revolutionary act was simply refusing to comply with injustice. Daniel Parker, now officially titled Alliance Coordinator, stood on a balcony overlooking Earth's capital and watched the celebrations below. Humanity had answered the Council's demand for taxes with silence, and that silence had echoed across the galaxy until it became a roar for freedom that no corrupt government could ignore.